Hi everyone, I'm Mika Kim, and for those of you who are visiting my channel for the first time, I'm currently a software engineer, and prior to that, I was in consulting. Very recently, I've made a job change, and that means that this whole recruiting process is very fresh in my mind right now. So before I forget all of these things, I wanted to create a video so that I can talk about some of my experiences as well as share some tips that I've collected along the way. So in this video, I will talk about the very first recruiting process, which typically is the recruiter call. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with how tech recruiting works, let's put it into like a different perspective. So imagine if you're on a dating app. You completed your dating profile and you uploaded it to the world. That's kind of like submitting your resume. You're writing some information about yourself and applying to the company. So now your dating profile is out in the world and someone swiped right and you matched. And now it's your first time messaging them and talking to them so that you can collect more information about them, see if you're vibing well, so that you don't waste time going out on like a couple of dates before deeming that this was a waste of time. So I would kind of like to say the recruiter screen is kind of like that initial like chat that you have with this person that you've matched with. So personally, when I go on recruiter calls, I kind of think of it more as a casual chat than like a formal interview. Don't forget, it's a two-way process. The recruiter is evaluating you to see that you're a good fit, but make sure that you take your time to evaluate the company to make sure that it's worth your time interviewing with this place. I know you might be thinking,
look, I'm just desperate for a job. I will interview with any company that gives me an interview.
Which is okay. I understand that. I've been there too. All I'm saying is use this opportunity to also look for red flags. You don't want to end up wasting your time interviewing with this company if you think they're not going to be respectful of your time. Or worst case, you don't want to end up taking an offer and quickly realizing that you hate this job or like you hate this company's mission or like this team that you're working with. So remember, this text screen is like a good start in checking if there are any red flags. And throughout the whole interview process, you should be diligent in making sure that nothing sticks out. That's a warning sign to you. And I will go into an example of where I caught a warning sign and ended up declining to move forward with the process a bit later. Okay, so at this point now, I think I've done around 30-ish recruiter calls. And here's a breakdown of how generally most of them were structured. So normally it'll be a phone or a video call. It will last around 30 minutes-ish. Oh, and sometimes the screen might be done by a hiring manager directly or sometimes even like a director level. But most of the times it would be a dedicated recruiter for this company. So keep that in mind as an FYI. They'll start off with a conversation about giving a quick intro about the company or the role that you're applying for, the team that you're applying for, and give you some more context around that. Then they'll generally ask you to give an intro about yourself. After that, they may ask you to give more details about things that were written on your resume or things that you've talked about during your intro. And sometimes they might ask you some behavioral questions. And I had one instance out of like the 30-ish recruiter calls that I had where a recruiter asked me some technical trivia questions. So by technical trivia questions, like an example of that would be, tell me about the difference between var, let, and const in JavaScript. So I got asked maybe like 3 or 5 questions during the recruiter call, but that was the only time that I've had that. When I have talked to my friends, some of them have had it happen to them like once in a while. This doesn't seem like it's a very common pattern, but it might happen. So don't be too alarmed if this happens to you. So make sure to prep a little bit if you're concerned about that. And finally, at the end, generally, it's your time to ask any questions that you had about the company, the role, etc., etc. Then the recruiter might ask you about your availability when you can take a phone screen or the next round of interviews. I also forgot to mention that during this whole conversation, they will also take some time to talk about how the whole recruiting process will work because it will vary by company. Some companies might have 1 technical phone screen, some companies might have 2, some companies might have like 5 different sessions for on-site. Some companies might break on-sites into 2 days. So like they'll kind of give you more details about how their interview process is structured. So make sure you take note of that as well while you're on this call. So I know I mentioned that I take recruiter calls as kind of more of like a casual chat and like the things that I've just described might not seem very casual, but trust me, like this feels more organic and the time goes so much faster than you think it will go. And also remember that it's a recruiter's job to go through these phone screens. They've done this multiple times. They know how to run these. So don't be scared of getting nervous. They will guide you and lead you through this conversation. Keep in mind, they aren't on this call to fail you. They're not waiting for you to make a mistake. They just want to learn more about you and make sure that they're there to answer your questions. So it's going to be okay. As I've mentioned, I've done these calls so many times now that I have a pretty good understanding of how these calls go and what to prepare for so that this call is beneficial for you and the recruiter. So let me just share some of these tips. Number 1, have a good introduction elevator pitch. Now, at this point, I'm pretty sure that most of you know what an elevator pitch is, so I won't go into the details of that. But basically, have a good short script that you can go through that describes who you are and some key relevant experiences that would be good highlights to mention so that you can tell the recruiter that you are a good candidate for this role. Remember that this is your chance to, in a way, convince the recruiter to move ahead in the recruiting process with you. Generally, things that I like to talk about is my current position. So I'm currently a software engineer at company X. And then I go into a very high level summary of an experience that's very relevant to this role that I'm applying for. So for instance, if I'm applying for a front-end engineer role, then I will talk about some of my biggest accomplishments that I've had at my current company in regards to these front-end projects. And one thing that I find helpful is to kind of like give a quick gist about like your specialty at the job. So like I said, that could be something like I'm a front-end engineer or back-end engineer, I'm a full stack engineer, iOS engineer, or it could also be things like I'm a front-end engineer, but I've worked on a lot of projects that were related to performance. So I'm like the performance subject matter expert on my team. Or maybe your thing is like all about unit testing. Like you're a huge advocate for writing unit tests and like making sure that the test frameworks that your current company is using is up to date and it's useful for the engineers. So if you have those kind of like niche specialties, also bring them up because it'll be good for the recruiter to know this and pass that along to the hiring manager so that it could be a plus point for you. And also another thing that I like to talk about is what I'm looking for in my next role. Or for new grads, what you're looking for your first full-time job. Are you looking to increase your project scope? Or are you looking to be in a team where you want to make high impact? Or a team that collaborates heavily with design and product managers and users? Or do you want to be on a team that's like really heavily invested into A/B testing? So bring those things up that align well with what the team is looking for so that you can kind of say like, hey, this is why I would be a good fit because this is what I'm looking for and this is what your team dynamic is like, or this is what your company culture is like and will be a good match. And that's also something that I like to kind of squeeze in my intro. So while you try to like go into these points, also make sure that you don't ramble on and on and on. Even when you're talking about your project, make sure it's like a one line or a two liner instead of like going into a full paragraph about small implementation details. Save that for later. You'll have more time to go into some details about significant projects. The recruiters might have a specific question to ask you about that. So 1 or 2 sentences for each of these bullet points so that it's nice and concise. And now this kind of leads to the second point, which is prepare good stories about your experiences beforehand. Maybe even like write them out before and have like a mental note about all the things that you've written. So what I generally like to do is craft about a 1-paragraph story about each of the things that I have written on my resume. So even though you think you can wing it, and I'm sure a lot of you can wing it really well, a benefit of writing this down beforehand though is as you're writing it down, as you're sitting and kind of thinking a bit more about, what did I actually do on that project? Like what was my impact on this project? You end up being able to come up with a bit more articulate, detailed story. Whereas if you just kind of wing it on the spot, you'll think of these kind of big things that you've done, but maybe you're missing out on some good details that would have been a very good bonus point for you. So I think writing it down kind of helps organize your thoughts and make sure that you don't forget about these good points to bring up. And honestly, if you prep this beforehand, this will also help you during your behavioral interviews later on sites. Most companies will have at least one behavioral or culture fit interview. And at that point, they will definitely ask you to go into more details about your experiences or ask you, tell me about a time question. And then you'll already have like this document that you've written beforehand that you just need to kind of go over and quickly read over again to refresh your mind before you go into these behavioral interviews. So I highly recommend writing them down beforehand. Also remember, anything on your resume is fair game. If you wrote about like this experience many years ago that you can't even remember the details of what happened during this event, then maybe it's best to not write it because if you get asked that question and you can't answer it, that will not look good. And this point leads me into topic number 3, which is don't lie. So in one of my older videos where I talk about how I got my job in consulting, or maybe it was the one where I did my resume reveal that got me my job at Deloitte. In one of those videos, someone in the comment wrote, just lie on your resume. There's no way for a company to verify that. And I'm pretty sure I left a reply comment to that comment saying, that's not true. Please don't lie. Companies will find out. Most companies will go through a third-party verification system where they can verify that you've worked at the company for the amount of time that you have stated that you've worked there for. And for other details like projects you worked on and things like that, if they want, they can call your references to make sure that all the things that you've said are valid. Or when you're going through the interview process and that they ask you about the details of that project, it's very telling if you've actually lied or not about that experience. So sure, some exaggeration, some fluffing up, some kind of like, embellishing the story is okay, but don't blatantly lie. Even during the recruiter call, anything you say on this call will be noted down. It will be trickled down to on-site, your technical phone screen, and it's subject to being asked more questions about in your other rounds. And let's say like somehow like you managed to push through and you got the offer, you won't be successful at your job. You're literally setting yourself for failure. So like I said, don't lie. All right, moving on to the next point, number 4, prepare questions that you're genuinely curious about. So don't ask questions for the sake of asking questions or for the sake of filling in time, or you think asking this question might give you some brownie points. There's no point in that. Ask questions that you really care about. So remember at the beginning of this video, I said this is kind of like the first messaging on a dating app where you're making sure that you get more information about this person so that you don't waste time going on multiple dates and then be like, oh, this is like a waste of time. Play a role in that during this recruiter call as well. Ask questions so that you really know what this company culture is about, what this team is looking for, and what this job entails. So personally for me, some of the things that I really care about in my job or my role is 1, the culture of the company and the team. 2, are there learning and growth opportunities? And 3, I really care about working on a product that makes me excited. So here are some of the core values. Like my values might be different from yours. Everyone's values are going to be different. But I make sure that I ask these questions to my recruiters, my hiring manager, and other engineers that are on my interview loop so that I can collect all this information. So I'm ready to make a decision if I want to accept or decline an offer. Because at the end of the day, this will be a company that I'll be working for, who knows how long, and I want to be happy at my job. Here are some of the questions that I ask that are based on my values. 1, what are the growth and learning opportunities for each engineer? 2, where is this product headed? What's the product vision? 3, how is the team structured and how many people are on the team? What does the interactions look like with other teams? So sometimes the recruiters might not have the best answers for you at the spot because, they might be sourcing for different teams and they just don't have enough information. But something that they can do for you in the event of that is they can maybe set up some time for you and the hiring manager to talk, or set up some time for you and some other engineers to talk so that you can get more information. Or they may just ask those questions to them and then get the answers for you. So like I said, just preparing good, genuine questions that will help you make a good decision as well. And let me share like a quick personal story of how this helped me. So this happened to me a couple months ago. I was talking to a recruiter and he was saying that there was this team with 5 backend engineers and they wanted 1 front-end / full stack engineer on the team. So I asked, how come there's only one, not even one, like a 0.5 front-end engineer for this team? And his response was, well, at our company, we run very lean. And so we're only hiring for 1 person to do like all the front end work and some back end work. And at that point, that was kind of like a yellow to red flag for me. So then I asked some more drilling questions about the culture. What are their core values and things like that? And it was very evident that their culture was more about like producing product quickly, making sure the values to customers go really quickly, but they had less respect for work-life balance or things like that. At that point of time, I was like, okay, this company runs lean, which is fine, but it's lean to the point where it's crunch culture. And for me, I knew that that wasn't going to work out. Despite the recruiter wanting to move forward with the process, I ended up declining it because I knew that even if I went through this whole interview process, I would probably never take this job regardless of how much money they paid me or whatnot, because I knew I wasn't going to be happy working in a company with a culture like that. So make sure you bring questions that will help you make an informed decision. Finally, I want to end this video by saying one thing, which is it's okay to be nervous. It's okay to feel jittery. It's okay to feel anxious before the interview. It's completely normal and it happens to everyone. I guarantee you. Okay, maybe there's some people that are like, naturally born to be never nervous, but I guarantee you it'll happen to almost everyone. And your recruiters, your interviewers, they all know that. And all good recruiters and interviewers will be very empathetic of the situation. And I'm sure when the roles are reversed and those recruiters and interviewers interview at other companies, that they probably go through the same thing. So they know where you're coming from. So let me wrap this up with another personal story of mine. And this happened very recently, like a couple of months ago when I was looking to transition from my old job to my current job. Let me also preface this by saying I interviewed a lot. And I don't even know if that's a break, probably not. But I'm just prefacing that saying I interviewed a lot and I still get nervous. So I was doing this phone screen with this company and my mind just suddenly went blank because I was just so nervous. And I was trying to write like a greater or equal symbol. And then my hands started just physically shaking because I just suddenly had a brain freeze and I was just blanking out, getting super nervous. And I wrote an arrow symbol instead. And I started having typos everywhere. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I really just want to hang up this call. And my interviewer realized that and he was like, hey, it's okay, calm down, take a deep breath. Everything's fine. You're doing okay. So I paused and I took some time to calm down a little bit. I went through the rest of the interview. But at that point, I'm still thinking, oh goodness, I got so nervous. I had this mini breakdown in the middle of my interview. And I just didn't feel great throughout the whole interview. But at the end of the day, I still passed that round. I got onto onsite and I ended up even getting offer from that company. And this isn't me bragging. The moral of the story is it's okay to get nervous. It's okay if these things happen. It's okay if you feel gosh, I was so awkward on that call or whatnot. Like I said, It happens to everyone. It's completely normal. So don't let that get to you. You'll be fine. Anyways, I know I rambled a little bit at the end, but I hope this video was helpful. If it was, please like and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in my next one. Oh, and good luck on your recruiter call. Bye.